You have questions? We have answers. Welcome to the Therapist Question Box with your host, Miss Lindsay Schiss.
Welcome back to another episode of the Therapist Question Box, where we are not afraid of anything. So ask away. We're here to tackle your tough questions. Today I have with me Kathy Kinghorn, CSTAT trained, co-owner of Therapy Utah, and a dear friend of mine. Kathy considers herself a hope merchant. Kathy, tell me, why do you consider yourself a hope merchant?
I sell hope.
Why? How do you sell hope? I want to get on. I want to sell hope. Tell me about that.
I do. And I think as therapists and humans, we ought to be selling hope. And what I just mean by that is we meet people on sometimes their toughest days, certainly in their toughest trials. And what they're looking for are answers, for sure. And they're also looking for the answer to, is there hope for a brighter tomorrow? And I believe even though the pain of today that they may be in, that's not taken away. But as they step into hope and get to believe there's hope, then the pain, the intensity dials back over time.
Yeah. I love that there's something more than the pain of the here and now.
Mm-hmm.
There's perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Really great. Well, maybe I can be a merchant of hope one day too. I like that. So today we're going to talk about what to do if your spouse, your child, your sister, a friend desperately needs help, but they aren't getting it, right? Do you get involved? And if you get involved, what do you do and how do you do it, right? So I think all of us have had this feeling before, that we've had someone in our lives that we know is struggling and that we know is in a position where they maybe could really use some professional help. But let's dial it back a little bit and just kind of let's talk about, how do you support somebody? Like, let's give an example of a family member. You know that maybe they're having anxiety. It's normal to have anxiety. We have anxiety producing situations. When should we get concerned that the anxiety is maybe too much, or maybe has continued too long? What is it? What are some warning signs that we need to be aware of that's maybe more than just situational and what's been going on in their lives?
It's a great question, Lindsay. In that particular situation, well, and it would also go for depression,
sure,
and other situations where we're believing maybe behaviors turned into a mental health issue or a diagnosis or something along those lines. When it becomes a pattern in practice, when it takes them away from activities that they would like to do, so they're saying, I would love to go to the family reunion. I've gone every year. I love my cousins. I can't wait. There's a couple of people that never really loved to hang out with, maybe. But overall, I'd love to go. I can't get myself to get out of the house. That sounds more on the level of having an outside intervention.
Okay. So it's really the mood or the feeling, whether it's anxiety, depression, has gotten in the way of somebody's life, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. That makes sense. What about also if you start to see coping that becomes costly? So tell me about that. You work in addiction, you work with sexual addiction. Do you see how sometimes anxiety that starts as anxiety turns into costly coping? Is that reason for concern?
Sure. When, the level of addiction, I know everybody says, well, everybody has an addiction. I just don't agree with that. I really don't. Addiction is a diagnosable behavior, thought process that is set apart from a bad choice. So somebody could go out and drink and overdrink with their buddies and have a great time, and then that great time turns into a terrible time. They say dumb things, they're out of line, they're inappropriate. They've crossed some lines that they never would have had they not been drinking to that level. Does that make them an alcoholic? No. Do they have an addiction to alcohol? No. Possibly. No. Right. So we have these situations where somebody could step in and have behavior that looks like they have an addiction. But what they did is they made a really dumb choice in that moment for a lot of reasons.
Sure.
So those kind of costly coping mechanisms, and in that situation, they may have thought, well, I need to, show everybody how tough I am. I can drink more than I usually do. So to fit in, that coping mechanism be driven by the desire to fit in could have cost them some relationships, harmed some relationships. But does it reach the addictive level? Not yet. Not yet.
Got it. And you can see where there's that fine balance, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's tricky sometimes to know when it's becoming addictive versus when it's coping, right?
Mm-hmm.
However, when it's coping, does it still kind of, would you still say that when we're coping, and I guess who's to say what's appropriate and inappropriate coping, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that for the individual? Is that for, who can answer that question?
Well, there's some harmful coping mechanisms. So if I'm going to shop for pain pills and I'm not in pain, I just want the numbness that comes from pain pills. That's a negative.
Sure.
There's never a win on that. If I'm coping by going shopping and spending beyond my means, that's just unhealthy, and that's going to drive to far worse behaviors and thoughts and feelings.
Sure.
So, but kind of back to your question, Lindsay, is somebody saying, hey, I need to take a step back. I've got too much on my agenda for too long, and I need to stay at home more. I need to just cut back on everything. That can be great. That can be some great self-care. That can be an awareness that they're running faster than they ought to be. However, it can also turn into isolation, shutting down, being fearful to re-engage because maybe somebody will ask too much of me and I don't have healthy boundaries to decline that request. So it can get something that's healthy self-care can turn unhealthy, in those situations.
Yes. So anything that becomes like addictive or singular focused really can become a problem because other things become out of balance. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Right.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. And here's one of the things that I have found is that when we ask, we're recognizing, okay, this is a coping pattern that's not really working. There's a lot of defensiveness that usually happens because it's typically serving them in some way, right? That it's helping them. And it usually creates a conflict between the two of us, right? So how do you in a kind way, and maybe kind's not the right word, but in a way to say, I am concerned, but this is not about me and you. This is really what's going on inside of you. And I'm coming from a place of concern. Because again, those coping mechanisms, even if they're harmful, can feel really like they're obviously doing something for the person.
Yeah.
So how do you how do you get through that where, it's not all of a sudden about you and me. It's actually about what's that coping mechanism that's not serving you.
Yeah, I would first start and really, really check into, is it not really about you and me? Like, do I have an agenda here? Because what I find is when we're in the company of somebody in pain, as wonderful people that we are, we want to remove that pain from them. We don't want to see it. We want to help them. So if I have this big fixer mentality that I want to help fix you, then I'm going to offer solutions that aren't helpful just yet. So you really do have to check in and go, what about this situation is uncomfortable for me? I'm seeing a friend in pain. I mean, that I love that part of me that's uncomfortable with that. I love that I have the empathy and that I'm connected enough and I have the privilege that my friend has shared with me that private pain. I mean, to me, when we're sharing the parts of ourselves that are painful, that's sacred ground.
For sure.
And so in that privileged situation, I have to check in and go, what part could this be about me? Like if she doesn't want to be or he doesn't want to be with me, what does it say about me? And if it says, well, you're failing as a friend or a partner, or why didn't you see this coming, or you should have known better than to do X, well, then you've still got an agenda that your pain is making these parts of me show up that are really uncomfortable, you know?
Oh, Kathy, you turn that on its head, because really now it's like we got to turn and actually look at ourselves in the mirror here and do some introspection and say, okay, what's going on with me in this situation? And what's my motive here? Is it my discomfort, right? I think that's such an important thing to remember, and really easy to overlook because it's uncomfortable. Right.
And we always have the banner of I'm doing it for the right reasons.
Sure.
Because that can cover a lot of misses.
Sure.
It really can.
For sure. Yeah. So if you look at that and were to say, okay, I've checked myself. I'm really trying to get honest with what my why is, my own discomfort. And I am still really concerned about the way this person in my life is showing up with these coping patterns. And I'm thinking that some of these coping mechanisms are really detrimental to them. How do we encourage them to get support?
It's a great question. First, if there's resistance, we may not have a lot of information about their resistance. What's their experience with therapy? I mean, when I was a kid, I went to a therapist for my brother who had quite a few issues, and it was a terrible experience. And I never thought I would be in a therapist's office again. It was just entirely terrible. And so if you're telling your friend, you know, hey, I think a therapist could help, and they have this one experience from their youth, they're going to go, no. But once you're able to talk, if you ask them, what's your experience with going to therapy? Do you know anybody that's gone to therapy? What's their value about it? When you just think of the word therapist, what comes to mind? And they might say, well, that I failed. You know, I was taught figure things out on your own. And so I'm a failure. Or I don't need to go for somebody to tell me I'm depressed. I know I'm depressed. I don't need to hear that. And I don't want to look at a worksheet and fill out a worksheet and do that. So give them time to tell you their why about their resistance. And oftentimes, once you get that information, it creates a different conversation.
Yeah. And you know what I'm hearing again is that really willingness to slow things down and to get curious and to sit with them in that pain. And I think sometimes it's really hard to do that. It's easier just to say, okay, here's the solution. Let's figure this out. This is really uncomfortable. Let's make it happen. And what I'm hearing you say is, no, we really need to get to the underlying, what's going on for you? Why is this uncomfortable? What's the relationship with therapy, and why is there resistance there? But I think that requires us to maybe sit in discomfort.
Yeah. And another point of this too, Lindsay, is sometimes we're sitting with couples that have made the decision to divorce, and they'll say to us, you know, do I need to bring the kids in? Right. And that makes sense. They've never been here before. They're worried about their kids. How is this going to impact them? I like to even put a pause button on that. Let's look at the strengths your family has. How are you able to talk to your kiddos about what's going to be happening? Do you already have some strengths built in? And let's see how we can create a space for your kiddos with you and your partner, and then see if the outside help is needed. Sometimes it is, but there's also times when, you know what, the family has enough strengths that right away the kids don't need any, you know, to come in, maybe down the road. But I think sometimes we forget the strengths we have already built into a relationship.
I love that. And to play off of those strengths. Like that's what we've got to start building from. And really, it sounds like you're saying, let's recognize that and let's start there. Really good. And I would imagine when that happens, then I start to build my own self-trust. Like, okay, I actually do have strengths in this. I may find later on I need help, but let's start where my own strengths lie and see what I can do from that perspective. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
So when we talk about addiction, you brought that up. I want you to I just have this is another listener question. And the question is this: my husband needs to be in therapy for an addiction, but he won't go. It is my only alternative divorce. How can you convince someone to go to therapy? I'm sure you've heard this before. This is not an unfamiliar question. What are your thoughts on that?
One, you can, that is a hard one because a lot rides on that, right?
Yeah.
Of course it does. If somebody has an addiction, resolving it on their own is rare. And then the fallout for the family is traumatic and for that individual as well. So sometimes you can work with a compromise. Would you go 3 times? All I'm asking is 3 times. I want to see a commitment to 3 visits. You can also certainly start on your own journey so that you have more information about the relationship. You have more skills to look at the relationship and go, okay, maybe it can't move forward, but the decision is much more educated in that moment. You have some help with seeing things. I have seen people that many times I'll have a guy come in and say, well, my wife wants me to be here.
Yeah.
And you know what? They'll still do the good work. I know that sounds crazy, and I'm not saying force somebody in, but what I have seen is that when they're pushed, that doesn't mean it's not still going to allow them the opportunity to meet with a skilled therapist and gain some tools.
Yes.
So I've seen it work both ways. I'm not saying that it's the best case scenario to have somebody pushed in, but a lot of times you can also again with them ask them about their experience. What's your fear? Well, they're just going to tell me I'm a terrible husband, and you've got issues, and all of a sudden every marital problem we have is going to be about me and my issues. So
turns into a big argument.
Yeah, and so you get curious about what's their experience with asking for help.
So good. And I would imagine to be able to have that kind of conversation and to sit in that might require you to be getting some help to understand your own emotional regulation and how you're feeling, right? Like when you say that, getting curious and really going to what's the root of this? Where's the fear? That requires some work on the other individual's part, right? Because that can be a difficult thing to do as well.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
And I love the idea when you said, you actually can do some of the work as well. You may not be that addicted partner, but when you have some tools and resources, then you can look at it from a perspective and have tools to help educate yourself on what's going on, what you can do. And I also think it gives the person some control. Say, okay, I can't control whether they will or won't go, but I know what my part is and what I can do in the situation. And that has to feel empowering.
Yeah, it can also feel super scary.
Tell me.
Super scary, because what you're talking about, Lindsay, is having somebody that maybe has never been taught about boundaries. Maybe they've never stepped into who they are. Maybe they have low self-worth where they go, I deserve this treatment. Life's pretty good and that's good enough. And so all of those kind of false beliefs can prevent them from coming in and learning about who they are and their strengths and how to get healthier in their beliefs about boundaries, about relationships.
Isn't that interesting? Because you can always say, well, look at the behavior. This is what they're doing. But you're saying for the individual that's, connected or a partner with an addicted individual, as this question is asking, gosh, there's a lot of scary things to uncover, right? And some introspection, like we talked about before, that can be difficult to do. That makes a lot of sense.
For sure.
Yeah. A really vulnerable place. Therapy can be it is really vulnerable, right? Bringing the hard things and the willingness to look at ourselves, it's difficult. So when we talk about this, another question that came up, and I thought it was really interesting, is this: are there ways to support an adult child who won't get the help they need? Right? We're in a little bit of a different situation when kids have grown, but you're still a parent, so you still have that relationship, but your ability to help and your ability to influence is different. What would you say to that?
You could speak to them about, would you be willing to make these efforts and see if a change occurs? So small efforts, like, would you be willing to take a walk at night? So let's say they're struggling with depression and not wanting to get out. Would you just be willing to walk around the block at night? And I think if you're willing to do that, then you're on the right path. You know, we can just try different things, really small steps. But wouldn't you agree that if that is insurmountable right now, getting out and just walking around the block, that you need more tools to figure out what's going on? So you kind of give them an option, right? Of, let's see if we can solve it. And then if we can't, wouldn't you agree that a therapist may add value to our situation?
So good. I love that idea of, like, let's just give them something, see what they can do. If it lands, great. And if not, then maybe again, stay in a place of, and when I think of this, I keep thinking in my mind, compassionate curiosity. Like, if I can stay, and it's not because I'm tired of your behavior and I'm sick of you, not whatever, showing up in this way, but like, my motive is because I love you. I think they feel that too. There's a difference when, okay, I know that you're really coming to me with this question because, and you're encouraging me to do this because you really care, versus like, I'm just tired of this behavior.
Right. And in that situation, if it's an adult child, just own anything that may be influencing their decision. So what I mean by that, maybe you were kind of a fix-it mom or dad, you know, and here's what you do, and then things are good. And so now your child is struggling and doesn't know how to fix something, and they know your position. Things get fixed and we move forward, right?
Yes.
So own where you are right now. Say, I have learned a lot. I can't fix you. And that message was throughout your childhood. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Let them see the transformation that you've had, so that it allows them to hear. And like you said, Lindsay, be seen. Be seen for maybe those places as a parent. Not maybe. We all miss it with being a parent.
You bet.
You know, and if we can own that and let them hear that and tell them, you may need to hear this more than once. Would you be willing to let me know if you need to hear it again, that I am sorry? That opens a door that you may have never even known needed to be opened. And that can give them the opportunity to get more vulnerable with you.
It's creating safety. Yeah. It's, you know, I keep hearing that theme. Look at yourself. Go back and look at yourself, right? And the willingness to say you're sorry, to sit in curiosity and really say, what's my part in this? What can I do? You know, if it's my partner, what part can I play? If it's an adult child, how can I look at my own behavior and say, okay, how have I contributed, or how has this affected this child? And really own some of those things. That is hard. And I appreciate that reminder that is so important. And because what it does is I hear that feels safe. That feels like, you know what, you care, and you really are not just trying to fix me, but you care.
Right. And honestly, that conversation oftentimes does need the person, you know, the parent, to come in and process through that with somebody. How do I have that kind of conversation? In that situation, you're not coming into therapy because, you know, hey, I've got a diagnosable mental health crisis or issue. I'm saying I need to come into therapy, and I want another set of eyes on this very important conversation. Can you help me with it? And that's where I think therapists do good work as well, is those moments in time in a relationship that are so important.
Right. So what I'm hearing is it's not just the person that might have the addictive behavior or the depressive feelings, anxiety, but it also might be those people supporting them that also need to get some support and guidance along the way. Great. Well, Kathy, thank you so much for being with us. I really appreciate your insights and helping those that we love who need help, and giving us some real resources and tools to help us and help us help them. So I really appreciate that. If you like this episode, please share it with your friends, rate it and review, and we'll see you next time.